7 weeks. No medication, no sightings. Nancy Guthrie is gone. The investigation into the 84-year-old's disappearance from her Tucson home has reached a chilling stalemate that is sending shockwaves through the Arizona desert. This isn't just a missing persons case anymore. It has evolved into a high-stakes search for answers in what experts are now calling a likely homicide. If you are new to the Mitchell Report, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications because this case is moving fast. The political fallout is reaching a boiling point, and you cannot afford to fall behind as the truth finally starts to surface. This is no longer a local mystery. It is a national tragedy that hits the doorstep of every American concerned about the safety of our seniors and the competency of our local leaders. To understand how we got here and why the trail has gone cold, we have to look at the one detail investigators are terrified to admit. The timeline here is brutal, and the math simply doesn't add up for a happy ending. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 49 days. For a woman in her late 80s, suffering from a chronic heart condition, 49 days without her daily medication is a death sentence in itself. Sources close to the investigation, including former high-ranking detectives, are now shifting their language. They are no longer talking about a rescue. They are talking about a recovery. One former detective, speaking with the clinical detachment of someone who has seen this 1,000 times, noted that at this point you have to assume this is a homicide case. It is a grim reality that the Tucson community is struggling to swallow. There is no middle ground here. Either this was a sophisticated hoax, which investigators have largely ruled out, or Nancy is gone. The physical limitations of an 80-year-old woman mean she didn't just wander off into the desert and survive for 2 months. She was taken. And as each day passes without a ransom demand or a sighting, the shadow of a horrific crime, as local officials are now calling it, grows longer over Pima County. The atmosphere in Tucson has shifted from concern to palpable fear. When a grandmother is snatched from her own home in broad daylight, the "it can't happen here" mentality evaporates instantly. Residents are reporting a surge in caution, locking doors that stayed open for decades, and eyeing neighbors with newfound suspicion. But the fear is being eclipsed by a rising tide of frustration directed squarely at Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. The public face of this investigation has become a lightning rod for criticism. While the Sheriff's Department claims they are analyzing DNA evidence and chasing leads, the lack of visible progress has created a vacuum. Progress feels frozen. We are seeing images from ring cameras and intersection videos being scrubbed by analysts, yet no suspect has been named. No vehicle of interest has been identified. This perceived stagnation has moved the case from the police blotter to the political arena. A local Republican congressional candidate has launched a petition to recall Sheriff Nanos, a Democrat, citing a lack of confidence in his ability to protect the community. It is a high-stakes political gamble fueled by a community that feels vulnerable and ignored. Amidst the forensic analysis and the political bickering, there is the Guthrie family, whose silence in recent weeks has been deafening. For the first month, the family was front and center, pleading for Nancy's return. Savannah Guthrie, a familiar face to millions of Americans, stood outside that Tucson home surrounded by a growing memorial of yellow flowers praying for a miracle. But it has now been more than 3 weeks since the family made any public comment. Savannah has returned to her post in New York, a move that signals a heartbreaking transition from active searching to the quiet, agonizing wait for news. When she appeared on the Today Show recently, she spoke of still believing in a miracle, but her presence back in the studio suggests the family is bracing for the worst. This shift in the family's public posture often indicates that law enforcement has shared sensitive, non-public information with them. The kind of information that changes the goal from find her alive to find her. This connects directly to what we just saw in the neighborhood. The yellow flowers are wilting, and the signs of hope are being replaced by the cold reality of a case that is growing colder by the hour. The investigative wall is real, and it's closing in, while the public sees a standstill. Sources close to the Pima County Sheriff's Department suggest a flurry of digital forensics is happening behind the scenes. We are talking about hundreds of hours of ring camera footage, intersection traffic cameras, and private security feeds. But here is the problem. Digital evidence is only as good as the trail it leaves, and in the sprawling outskirts of Tucson, those trails can vanish into the desert floor. Criminologists looking at this case are pointing to a professional level of disappearance. Nancy didn't just vanish, she was erased from her environment. This suggests a level of premeditation that moves this beyond a simple crime of opportunity. if someone targeted an 84-year-old woman with a heart condition, they knew her schedule, they knew her vulnerabilities, and most importantly, they knew the gaps in the local surveillance net. Investigators are reportedly frustrated by the slowing tips, a natural but deadly phase in any missing persons case where the public's memory begins to haze. The urgency that once defined the first 48 hours has been replaced by the slow, grinding work of DNA sequencing and cell tower pings, work that takes months, not days. Building on what we've established about the technical side of the hunt, we have to address the massive political elephant in the room. In Arizona, everything is local and everything is political. The petition to recall Sheriff Chris Nanos isn't just a Republican versus Democrat skirmish. It is a reflection of a community that feels the social contract has been broken. When a grandmother can be taken from her home and 7 weeks pass without a single person in handcuffs, the question of leadership becomes unavoidable. Legal experts watching the recall effort note that this puts immense pressure on the Pima County Sheriff's Department to produce a win, and quickly. But high-pressure investigations are often where the most critical mistakes are made. If the department rushes to make an arrest to satisfy a political timeline, they risk a botched prosecution. This creates a catch-22. Move too slow and you lose your job. Move too fast and you lose the case. For the residents of Tucson, this isn't about politics. It's about the fact that they no longer feel safe in their own living rooms. They see a sheriff who is under fire and an investigation that looks from the outside like it has hit a brick wall. This is where the situation shifts from a news report to a visceral, human tragedy. To truly understand the pain the Guthrie family is enduring, you have to look at those who have lived through this nightmare before. Tammy Tacho is a name that resonates with many in this region. In 1991, her 12-year-old brother Jimmy vanished. One moment he was waving goodbye as his family drove away for a short trip. The next, he was a ghost. For Tammy, seeing the yellow flowers outside Nancy Guthrie's home isn't just a news story. It's a flashback to a wound that has never healed. It was all like a nightmare, she recalls, her voice carrying the weight of 35 years of unanswered questions. This is the hidden cost of these cases. It isn't just about the person who is missing. It's about the ripples of trauma that shatter entire families for generations. When Savannah Guthrie stands in that New York studio, she isn't just a journalist. She is a daughter living in the same nightmare Tammy described. The human vulnerability here is staggering. Every time a car door slams or a phone rings late at night, a family like the Guthries feels a jolt of hope, followed by a crushing wave of reality. The expert analysis on this case is becoming increasingly grim. Retired FBI agents and forensic analysts point to the 7-week marker as a definitive turning point. Statistically, the likelihood of a positive outcome drops to near zero after the first week, let alone the 7th. Criminologists are now focusing on the disposal site theory, a cold but necessary part of the investigation. If Nancy was taken, where was she taken to? The Arizona desert is vast, unforgiving, and unfortunately a place where secrets stay buried for decades. Forensic analysts are likely looking at soil samples, tire tracks, and even satellite imagery to find any disturbance in the local landscape. But without a suspect, they are looking for a needle in 1,000 haystacks. This leads to a bigger issue, the lack of a crime scene within the home itself. Reports indicate there was no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, and no blood. This points to one of two terrifying possibilities. Either Nancy knew her abductor, or the perpetrator was so efficient that they left no physical footprint behind. Both scenarios are equally chilling for a community looking for answers. The cold reality of a nobody investigation is where this case currently sits, and it is a place no investigator ever wants to be. Without a physical crime scene or a clear recovery of Nancy Guthrie, Pima County officials are essentially working a ghost case. Building on the forensic analysis, experts suggest that the focus is now shifting toward a digital victimology profile. This means investigators are looking at every single person Nancy had contact with in the 6 months leading up to her disappearance. Was there a contractor who saw too much? A repairman who noticed her routine? Former FBI agents specializing in predatory behavior note that someone this vulnerable, an 84-year-old woman living alone, is often scouted long before the crime occurs. This isn't just a random snatch and grab. This is the calculated removal of a human being from her own life. The terrifying implication for every American senior living independently is that their very independence makes them a target. The quiet neighborhoods of Tucson, once thought to be sanctuaries for retirees, now feel like hunting grounds. And this is where the situation shifts from a search for a missing person to a deep dive into the shadows of Pima County's criminal underbelly. While the sheriff's department is public about checking leads, sources indicate they are quietly looking into transient populations and known offenders in the area who may have been in the vicinity of the Guthrie home on that fateful day. But there is a catch. The desert is a vast, anonymous space. If someone moved Nancy Guthrie across state lines or deep into the federal lands surrounding Tucson, the jurisdictional nightmare begins. Security analysts suggest that the lack of a silver alert success in the first 24 hours was the first domino to fall. Now, we are looking at a search area that has expanded from a neighborhood to a region. This connects directly to what the community is feeling, a sense of helplessness. If the professionals with millions of dollars in equipment can't find a trace of an elderly woman after 7 weeks, what hope does the average citizen have? The frustration isn't just about politics. It's about a fundamental fear that the system designed to protect us has a massive gaping hole in it. The emotional anchor of this case isn't just the disappearance itself. It's the agonizing frozen time that families like the Guthries are forced to inhabit. When we look back at the case of Jimmy Tacho from 1991, we see the blueprint for Nancy's family. Jimmy's sister, Tammy, describes a life lived in a perpetual state of what if. For the Guthries, every sunset over the Arizona horizon is a reminder that another day has passed without a voice, a touch, or a goodbye. This is the community pain that doesn't make the headlines, but stays in the marrow of the neighborhood. The yellow flowers outside the home are more than just a memorial. They are a symbol of a community's collective grief and their demand for justice. Legal experts suggest that even if an arrest is made tomorrow, the damage to the social fabric of this Tucson community will take decades to repair. The vulnerability of our elderly is a raw nerve in America, and this case has exposed just how exposed they truly are. As Savannah Guthrie returns to her life in the public eye, she carries a private burden that millions of Americans can only imagine, yet deeply fear. Looking at the future scenarios for this investigation, there are 3 likely paths, and none of them offer easy comfort. The first is a cold case designation, where the files are moved to a cabinet and the active search ends. This is the outcome the community fears most, a permanent silence. The second is a breakthrough through technology, where a piece of DNA evidence or a digital footprint finally identifies a suspect months or even years from now. This often happens in cases where the perpetrator is eventually arrested for an unrelated crime. The third and most high-stakes scenario is a political overhaul of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. If the recall effort succeeds, a new administration might bring fresh eyes to the case. But fresh eyes can't always find a trail that has been cold for 7 weeks. Criminologists warn that new isn't always better when it comes to forensic integrity. What happens next changes everything for how we handle missing seniors in this country. The Nancy Guthrie law or similar legislative pushes for better senior tracking and alert systems are already being discussed in hushed tones by advocates. The international dimension of this case is something investigators are only beginning to publicly acknowledge. Tucson's proximity to the border adds a layer of complexity that transforms a local disappearance into a potential federal crisis. Security analysts have long warned that the corridors surrounding Pima County are utilized by sophisticated criminal networks that operate outside the reach of local sheriffs. If Nancy Guthrie was caught in the crosshairs of an organization with the resources to move across state or international lines, the DNA evidence local officials are touting may never find a match in a domestic database. This shifts the entire investigation into a different gear, one where the FBI and Department of Homeland Security become the primary drivers. For the people of Arizona, the idea that a grandmother could be swept up into a larger, more dangerous world is a nightmare they are now forced to confront. It raises the question, is our local law enforcement equipped to handle the modern, globalized nature of crime? The answer coming out of Tucson right now, according to many frustrated residents, is a resounding no. This is where the situation shifts from a search for one woman to an indictment of an entire security apparatus that failed to see the warning signs before it was too late. After 7 weeks, the math is brutal, but the resolve of the American people remains the only light in a very dark room. Nancy Guthrie isn't just a name on a missing persons poster. She represents every grandmother, every neighbor, and every vulnerable citizen who deserves the basic right to be safe in their own home. We have seen the timeline stretch from hours to days and now into months And while the miracles Savannah Guthrie spoke of feel further away, the demand for the truth has never been louder. If you found this breakdown valuable and believe that cases like Nancy's deserve national attention until they are solved, share this video with someone who needs to see the full picture. Make sure you hit like and stay updated by engaging in the comments below. Your voice keeps the pressure on the authorities who hold the keys to this investigation. Stay with us as this develops, because the next update could come at any moment, and when the truth finally breaks through the desert silence, we will be here to bring it to you first. Somewhere under the Arizona sun, the truth is waiting to be found, and the trail, no matter how cold, eventually leads to justice. I am Michelle. This is the Michelle Report. Thank you for watching.